استناداً لأحكام المادة 333 من قانون العقوبات رقم 111 لسنة 1969 المعدل.
The steel door clanged open. Boots echoed down the corridor. No courtroom, no crowds, only whispers and rope. He didn't plead. He stood defiant. By sunrise, Iraq's ruler would be gone. But the collapse started years earlier, engineered by fear, leveraged power, and a single lie that reshaped the world forever. Let's begin the final 24 hours of Saddam Hussein. Cold air filled the cell. The lights flickered on, harsh and white. Saddam sat still on his cot. No throne, no generals, just a Quran and a ticking clock. The sound echoed in the quiet. Each second felt heavier than the last. He ran his fingers over the worn pages. He wasn't reading, he was remembering. Outside, boots scraped the floor. Soldiers whispered. Some looked uneasy. Others were waiting for dawn. For days, the unit assigned to guard him had been restless. Alert to every order, every radio call. But tonight felt different. Their supervisors had been briefed. Something was in motion. The man they'd watched for months, the once feared ruler of Iraq, would soon be taken from this place and handed over to Iraqi custody. For the guards, it was no longer a rumor. It was real. The end was coming. With him, decades of terror would finally close. He had ruled Iraq through fear, his power carved from blood and silence. The Dujal massacre, Halabja, Kuwait, names that still made men shudder. Now the same man who commanded armies sat alone, surrounded by walls instead of soldiers. His defense lawyer, Naib al-Naomi, had guessed it right. The execution would come by Saturday, December 30th, 2006 at 3 a.m. And Saturday was only hours away. Saddam hadn't slept. He refused to. Sleep felt like surrender. Instead, he prayed, slow, calm, focused. His voice, once fierce and commanding, is now barely a whisper. Memories flashed, the parades, the speeches, the fear in others' eyes. Power had made him untouchable. Now it meant nothing. His thoughts drifted back to 9/11, the day America was shaken to its core. Attention turned once more to Iraq. Whispers of hidden weapons spread like wildfire. Leaders spoke with certainty. Investigations were launched. But the feared weapons were never found. Still, the invasion pressed on. The regime collapsed, and Saddam's fate was sealed. Saddam once ruled with fear. The world never forgot. He lifted his eyes to the ceiling. No gold, no flag, no audience, just silence. The clock kept ticking. Outside, footsteps grew louder. Inside, he bowed his head. Not as a ruler, but as a man meeting the end he could no longer delay. The warden approached. His boots echoed down the corridor. The first lieutenant stood outside Saddam Hussein's cell. Beside him, his longtime interpreter, a man who knew Saddam's voice, tone, and temper better than anyone. He was trained for order, not for history. Yet tonight, he was about to witness it. He flicked on the light. The cell glowed dimly, revealing the familiar figure sitting calmly on his cot. He stopped at the cell door and spoke quietly. "Time," he said. Saddam looked up. No surprise, no protest, just a slow nod. He requested time to prepare. They granted it, out of respect, or perhaps out of disbelief at his composure. His eyes were calm, almost detached. A man who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. He had faced death before, in wars and revolts, in shadows of betrayal. But this time, it was final. No army, no escape. He asked to bathe. He walked to the small sink in his cell. Cold water ran through his fingers as he cupped it over his head. Each splash echoed softly in the silence. His hands, same hands that once signed death warrants, trembled. It was his final cleansing. The dictator was gone. What remained was just an old man, stripped of everything but time. Calm, silent, accepting what he could not change. For the interpreter, it cut deep. 15 months of words and uneasy familiarity had blurred the line between enemy and man. Now he was watching him prepare for death. Quietly, thousands of miles away in Washington, D.C., a call was made. President George W. Bush was informed by his advisor, Stephen Hadley. Saddam Hussein will be executed within hours. The message was short. The weight is immeasurable. The date itself carried meaning. It fell on a sacred holiday for many of Saddam's followers. To some, it felt intentional, a final humiliation. To others, it was long-delayed justice. For Iraq's new leaders, it was something else. Closure. A reckoning after years of silence and fear. The warden asked if he wanted a last meal. Saddam thought for a moment, then answered softly. Chicken and rice. A simple dish. Familiar. Almost humble. There was no wine, no lavish spread. Just a metal tray, a soldier's meal. Just chicken and rice with a cup of hot water and honey. He ate in silence. No hurry, no emotion. Each bite was slow, steady, like a man trying to taste memory itself. He paused often, staring at nothing. Maybe he was back in Tikrit, eating with his family. Maybe he was thinking of his sons, both gone. The clock ticked again. He finished the last sip of honey water and pushed the tray away. His hands were steady, his eyes unblinking. The man who once ruled Iraq sat quietly, waiting for dawn. The cell door creaked open. Guards stepped in, calm, deliberate, professional. He sat on the edge of the bed. The hallway echoed with the sound of boots. Silence pressed against the walls. A young guard stood nearby, eyes lowered. He looked nervous, almost afraid to breathe. Saddam watched him for a moment. Then he reached for his wrist. The old silver Raymond watch clicked loose. It was scratched, heavy, and full of memories. He held out the watch. "Take it," Saddam said quietly. "A memory." The young guard shook his head. "I can't," he whispered. "It's against the law. We're not allowed to accept gifts." Saddam's eyes softened. For a moment, the hardness in his face faded. He stepped closer, closing the small space between them. "You were a good friend," he said. "Keep it." The guard froze, torn between duty and emotion. The watch gleamed under the dim light, a symbol of defiance, of farewell. Finally, the guard nodded, hands trembling as he accepted it. Neither spoke again. The silence between them said everything. The night stayed calm. Saddam chose one of his finest suits. First, he put on a white shirt, then a black V-neck sweater. A black coat followed. Black trousers, black shoes. His jet black hair was neatly combed. His salt and pepper beard is trimmed. A black wool cap covered his head. It stayed on as he walked forward, until he was told to remove it, seconds before the hanging. Every detail is deliberate. Every movement was controlled. He sprayed too much cologne. One soldier later joked, "You could smell him from a mile away." The Super 12 gathered near his cell. They stood in full battle gear. Saddam noticed them. He stood tall. His voice didn't shake. "You've become more like family to me than any Iraqi," Saddam said quietly. He promised he would die like a soldier. Then one by one, he thanked his guards, shaking every hand. For the first time, they saw tears slide down his face. It was a strange moment, the fallen ruler showing something human. Moments later, a helicopter lifted into the dark sky. Baghdad lay silent below, a city that once trembled at his name. After a tense flight and a cramped ride in the armored Rhino, they arrived. His final destination, Camp Justice, once the feared Isharat military intelligence headquarters. Now the stage for his reckoning. The same walls that once echoed with screams under his rule would now witness his end. Security was ironclad. American forces guarded the perimeter. Iraqis controlled the gallows. This had to look like Iraq's justice, not America's revenge. When Saddam stepped from the vehicle, everything changed. His back straightened, his eyes hardened. Each step toward the gallows carried the weight of history, a dictator walking toward his own justice on Iraqi soil. He walked forward, calm and composed. One held the cuffs, another the leather straps. Saddam didn't flinch. His eyes followed their every move, sharp, steady, unreadable. 69 years after Iraq's birth, the night was tense. Security was tight. American troops surrounded the area. Iraqi guards stood by the gallows. The Americans stayed outside. This was Iraq's moment. Saddam stepped out of the armored truck. His back was straight. Each step grew heavier, but his pride stood tall. The guards watched quietly. Some looked away, others stared. The rope swung slightly in the cold wind. They knew Saddam feared this death more than any other. He was handed to Muwaffaq al-Rubai. Years ago, Saddam's men had tortured him. Now he led his former ruler to die. History had turned upside down. Inside, the judge read the charges. He reached for his Quran, pressing it firmly against his chest, as if drawing strength from every verse he had memorized. Some said he murmured prayers under his breath. Others swore they saw a faint smile, not of peace, but of pride. And as he walked down that dim corridor, he didn't seem defeated. He seemed unbroken. The execution chamber waited, sterile, bright, and silent. A few officials, a handful of witnesses, no Americans, no delay. The air was thick with tension. Some guards muttered prayers. Others taunted him. They shouted, mocking him with the name of a Shiite cleric. Saddam turned his head, eyes sharp. "Do you call this bravery?" he asked. Then he laughed, low, bitter, unbroken. Someone shouted, "Go to hell!" He shot back, "The hell is Iraq." The deputy prosecutor, Munkith al-Faroun, turned to the crowd. "Please stop," he said. "This man is facing execution." The Super 12 sat in tense silence. Outside, preparations rushed into motion. The chamber felt colder than the desert night. Each second stretched. Then, a sudden crash. The sound tore through the air like an explosion. The walls shook. Their chests rattled. For a moment, no one moved. Then, his voice grew calm. He quietly spoke the words of his faith, declaring his belief in God and his messenger. He said it once, started again, didn't finish. The trap door fell. A sharp crack echoed through the chamber. Silence followed. No cheers, no cries. Just a cold stillness. A tyrant or a martyr, depending on who you asked, was gone. A doctor checked for a heartbeat. None. The rope was cut. The body lowered into a plain coffin. Years of rule ended in minutes. Almost instantly, gunfire erupted outside. It wasn't an invasion. It was a joy, a wild celebration. People had waited years for this moment. By dawn, his remains were flown to Tikrit, his birthplace, buried beside his sons. The man who once ruled Iraq was now just another name etched in dust. He ruled with fear. He died with defiance. But even in death, Saddam Hussein left behind a question. When a man builds his power through blood, does justice mean ending his life or letting history remember what he became? What do you think? Was this justice served or vengeance disguised? Let's talk in the comments and hit subscribe for more stories like this.